There comes a moment in life, quiet, almost invisible, when you realize no one is coming to save you. No applause, no permission, no one standing in your corner saying, "It's your turn now." And in that moment, you have a choice: abandon yourself or finally choose yourself. Most people don't talk about this moment because it's not glamorous, it's lonely. It's the moment you stop waiting to be picked, approved, validated, or understood. It's the moment you realize that if you don't choose yourself, you may disappear inside a life that looks fine from the outside, but feels empty on the inside. Before we go any further, if this kind of honest, soul-level conversation matters to you, subscribe to this channel now. This is the Peace Whisper, and this space is for women who are done shrinking and ready to come home to themselves. I want to tell you a story. There was a woman who gave everything to everyone. She was the strong one, the dependable one, the one who showed up even when she was exhausted. She learned early that love meant sacrifice, that being good meant being quiet, and that choosing herself was somehow selfish. And one day she broke, not loudly, not dramatically. She just woke up and felt nothing, no joy, no fire, just a deep tiredness in her bones. She looked around and realized something painful. She had been there for everyone, but no one was really there for her. And the hardest truth hit her: she had abandoned herself long before anyone else did. Choosing yourself doesn't start with confidence. It starts with honesty. It starts when you admit, "I am unhappy. I am tired of proving my worth. I am done begging for love that should be freely given." For women especially, choosing yourself can feel wrong. We are taught to nurture, to accommodate, to hold everything together. But hear this clearly: self-betrayal is not kindness, and burning yourself alive to keep others warm is not love. Choosing yourself means setting boundaries that feel uncomfortable at first. It means disappointing people who benefited from your silence. It means letting go of versions of yourself that survived, but no longer fit. And yes, sometimes you will choose yourself and still be misunderstood, still be judged, still be alone for a season. But peace begins there, because when you choose yourself, you stop asking, "Am I enough?" You start saying, "I belong to myself." You don't need everyone to clap. You don't need universal approval. You need alignment. If this message is speaking to you, share it with another woman who's been carrying too much alone. And let me know in the comments, what is one way you are choosing yourself this season? Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Here's the truth we don't say out loud enough: when no one else chooses you, that is not the end of the story. That is the beginning of your authority. That is where you learn to stand without leaning, to love without losing yourself, to live without apology. Choosing yourself won't make life perfect, but it will make it honest, and honest living creates peace. Stay with this channel, stay with this work, and most importantly, stay with yourself. There is a moment that doesn't announce itself. No dramatic music, no warning. Just a quiet realization that settles into your chest when you least expect it. You're standing in the middle of your life, surrounded by people, responsibilities, noise, and suddenly you see it clearly. No one is coming to rescue you. No one is going to notice how much you've been carrying. No one is going to step in and say, "You've done enough, rest now. It's your turn." That moment can feel terrifying, because it strips away every illusion you've been holding on to. For many women, this realization comes after years of waiting. Waiting to be chosen, waiting to be appreciated, waiting for someone to finally see how hard you're trying, how much you've sacrificed, how deeply you care. You tell yourself, just a little longer, just be patient, just keep giving. But time passes and the validation doesn't come, the support doesn't come, the rescue doesn't come. And that's when the silence gets loud. You begin to notice how often you show up for others while postponing yourself. How often you say yes when your body is begging for no. How often you swallow your needs because it feels safer to be needed than to be honest. In that moment, when no one is choosing you, it can feel like rejection, like failure, like proof that you somehow weren't enough to deserve being prioritized. But this moment isn't here to break you. It's here to wake you up. Because as painful as it is to realize no one is coming, it is also freeing. It releases you from the exhausting job of waiting. Waiting keeps you small. Waiting keeps you quiet. Waiting teaches you to tolerate what you should question. And the longer you wait, the more disconnected you become from your own voice. This is the moment where responsibility shifts. Not the heavy, punishing kind of responsibility, but the kind that gives you your power back. You stop outsourcing your worth. You stop hoping someone else will notice your pain and fix it. You stop performing for love. You realize that choosing yourself does not begin when circumstances change. It begins when you decide that your life is too precious to be lived on pause. There is grief here, real grief. Grief for the younger version of you who believed that being good, loyal, and selfless would guarantee love. Grief for the years you spent overgiving, thinking it would make you indispensable. Grief for the moments you ignored your intuition because you were afraid of being alone. And yet something strong is born in this space. When no one else chooses you, you are forced to look at yourself without filters. You meet your own eyes. You hear your own needs. You finally ask questions you've been avoiding. What do I want? What do I need? What am I tolerating that is costing me my peace? This moment teaches you that abandonment by others often mirrors abandonment of self. And once you see that, you can no longer unsee it. You start noticing how often you leave yourself behind to maintain harmony. How often you minimize your pain to keep the peace. How often you shrink so others can feel comfortable. Choosing yourself begins right here, not with confidence, but with clarity. With the understanding that waiting has never protected you. That silence has never healed you. That disappearing has never made you loved. This is the space where you stop asking for permission to exist fully. Where you stop hoping someone else will validate your feelings. Where you begin to recognize that the rescue you were waiting for was never meant to come from outside of you. Self-betrayal rarely begins as a choice. It begins as adaptation. As a child, you learn quickly what keeps you safe, what earns love, what avoids conflict. You notice which parts of you are welcomed and which parts create tension. Slowly, quietly, you start editing yourself. You learn to read the room before you speak. You learn to soften your needs, lower your expectations, and make yourself easier to handle. At the time, this isn't weakness, it's intelligence, it's survival. For many women, love is introduced with conditions. Be agreeable, be patient, be grateful, be strong. Don't ask for too much. Don't make it about you. So you absorb the message that your needs are negotiable, but your role is not. You become the peacemaker, the helper, the one who holds everything together. Each small act of self-denial feels harmless. You tell yourself you're being mature, generous, understanding. Over time, those small denials turn into a pattern. You ignore your exhaustion because someone else needs you. You dismiss your discomfort because you don't want to seem difficult. You override your intuition because you've been taught that questioning is disrespectful or dramatic. Without realizing it, you train yourself to distrust your own inner signals. Your body speaks, but you silence it. Your heart reacts, but you rationalize it away. This is how self-betrayal becomes normal. It doesn't feel like betrayal because it's familiar. It feels like being responsible, like being loving, like being the bigger person. You convince yourself that enduring is a virtue, that patience will eventually be rewarded, that if you just try harder, things will change. And because the world often praises self-sacrifice in women, you are reinforced for disappearing. But survival patterns don't disappear just because the danger is gone. What once protected you begins to imprison you. You keep overgiving in relationships that drain you. You stay silent in spaces where your voice matters. You remain loyal to people who are not loyal to your well-being. And each time you do, a quiet resentment builds, not just toward others, but toward yourself. There is a deep exhaustion that comes from living this way, not the kind sleep can fix. It's the fatigue of constantly overriding your truth, of smiling when something hurts, of agreeing when something feels wrong. Your nervous system stays on alert, scanning for approval, bracing for disappointment, preparing to adapt again. At some point, the cost becomes undeniable. You realize that you don't know what you want anymore, because you've spent so long responding to what everyone else needs. You feel disconnected from your own desires. Decisions feel heavy because you've lost trust in yourself. And the saddest part is that you may still blame yourself, believing you're too sensitive, too emotional, too much. Self-betrayal teaches you to abandon yourself before anyone else can. It convinces you that leaving yourself is safer than risking rejection. But the pain of self-abandonment doesn't disappear. It accumulates. It shows up as anxiety, resentment, numbness, and a quiet sense of loss you can't quite name. Recognizing this pattern is not about blame. It's about compassion. You didn't choose self-betrayal because you were weak. You learned it because you were trying to survive, to belong, to be loved. And the moment you see this clearly, something shifts. You begin to understand that honoring yourself is not selfish, but necessary. That listening to your needs is not a threat to love, but a foundation for it. That the patterns you learned can be unlearned. One honest choice at a time, choosing yourself, often feels selfish not because it is wrong, but because of what you were taught about love, worth, and responsibility. From an early age, many women learn that being good means being accommodating, that care means sacrifice, that love is proven through endurance. So when the idea of prioritizing yourself appears, it clashes with everything you were praised for. Your nervous system reacts as if you're doing something dangerous, even when you're simply being honest. Guilt shows up immediately. The voice inside says, "What about everyone else? Who will be disappointed? Who will think you've changed?" This guilt is powerful because it's familiar. It has kept you connected. It has helped you maintain roles that made others comfortable. And because approval once felt like safety, stepping outside of it can feel like a betrayal of everything you were taught to be. But selfishness and self-respect are not the same thing. Selfishness disregards others. Choosing yourself acknowledges yourself. It's the difference between taking at the expense of others and simply refusing to abandon your own needs. When you choose yourself, you're not demanding that others suffer. You're deciding that you will no longer be the only one who does. There is often fear underneath the guilt. Fear of being seen as difficult. Fear of being labeled cold, ungrateful, or dramatic. Fear of losing relationships that depend on your overgiving. These fears aren't imagined. Sometimes, when you choose yourself, people do react. Not because you are wrong, but because the version of you they benefited from is changing. This is where the discomfort intensifies. You start to notice how often your presence was tied to what you provided. How love was conditional on your availability. How appreciation faded the moment you said no. And that realization can hurt deeply because it exposes the imbalance you once worked so hard to maintain. Choosing yourself asks you to tolerate that discomfort without retreating. To sit with the guilt without letting it control you. To understand that feeling selfish doesn't mean you are selfish. It means you are breaking a pattern. It means you are learning to listen to your own needs after years of ignoring them. For women especially, self-sacrifice is often mistaken for morality. You are praised for being endlessly patient, endlessly forgiving, endlessly giving. Rarely are you celebrated for being honest about your limits. So when you begin to set boundaries, it can feel like you're doing something wrong, even when your body feels relief for the first time. That relief matters. Your body knows the difference between harm and safety. When you stop overextending yourself, when you rest without apology, when you speak your truth without softening it to make others comfortable, your nervous system begins to settle. This is not selfishness. This is regulation. This is healing. Choosing yourself also reveals who respects you and who only tolerated you as long as you were convenient. That clarity can be painful, but it is also freeing. It allows you to stop chasing connections that require self-erasure. It opens space for relationships rooted in mutual care rather than obligation. The more you practice choosing yourself, the quieter the guilt becomes. Not because you stop caring about others, but because you start caring about yourself. You realize that love that requires you to disappear is not love that sustains you. You understand that honoring your needs does not make you less compassionate. It makes your compassion honest. In time, choosing yourself stops feeling like rebellion and starts feeling like alignment. Your decisions come from clarity rather than fear. You begin to trust that you can be kind without being depleted, present without being consumed, generous without being empty. And you learn that the life you are building by choosing yourself is not built against others, but built on truth. Loneliness doesn't always arrive when people leave. Sometimes it arrives when you stop abandoning yourself and realize how empty the space has been. Choosing yourself often creates a quiet distance between you and the life you used to live. The routines remain, the faces are familiar, but something has shifted inside you. You are no longer willing to disappear to maintain connection, and that changes everything. There is a season that comes after you stop overgiving, and before peace fully settles in. It is tender, uncomfortable, often misunderstood. In this space, you may feel more alone than you ever have, not because you lost everyone, but because you stopped betraying yourself to keep them close. The old strategies no longer work, and the new ones haven't fully formed yet. This loneliness can feel confusing. You did the brave thing. You spoke up. You set boundaries. You chose honesty over harmony. And yet, instead of immediate relief, you feel exposed. You wonder if you made a mistake. You question whether choosing yourself was worth the distance it created. These doubts are not signs of failure. They are signs of transition. When you stop centering your life around others' expectations, you begin to hear your own thoughts more clearly. And sometimes what you hear is grief. Grief for relationships that only existed when you were smaller. Grief for versions of yourself that survived by staying quiet. Grief for the sense of belonging that came from being needed, even when it cost you your peace. Loneliness in this phase is not a punishment. It is an initiation. It teaches you how much of your identity was shaped around roles rather than truth. Without constant external validation, you are invited to sit with yourself, to feel what you feel without distraction, to notice where you've been filling silence with obligation. This kind of loneliness strips away noise and leaves you face to face with your inner world. That can be unsettling. You may feel untethered, unsure of who you are without the roles you played. You may miss the version of you that was always included, always relied on, always needed. Even if that version was exhausted, she was familiar. Letting her go can feel like loss, even when you know she was hurting. But this loneliness also creates space. Space to redefine connection. Space to learn what feels nourishing instead of draining. Space to rebuild your sense of belonging from the inside out, rather than chasing it from others. You begin to notice which connections deepen with honesty and which fade without performance. Inner peace does not arrive all at once. It arrives in small moments. In the relief of saying no and surviving it. In the calm of not explaining yourself. In the quiet confidence that grows when you honor your limits. These moments may be subtle, but they are powerful. They mark the shift from loneliness rooted in abandonment to solitude rooted in self-trust. As you move through this season, you learn to sit with yourself without judgment, to offer yourself the patience you once reserved for others, to create rituals that ground you, to listen to your intuition instead of drowning it out with noise. Slowly, the loneliness begins to soften. It no longer feels like emptiness, but like space. This space is where your inner peace begins to take shape, not the loud, performative kind, but a steady calm that comes from alignment. From knowing you are no longer living against yourself. From trusting that you can handle discomfort without running back to what broke you. The loneliness doesn't vanish overnight. It transforms. It becomes a quiet companion rather than a heavy weight. It reminds you that you are learning a new way of being, one rooted in truth rather than approval. And in that truth, you begin to feel a deeper sense of connection, first to yourself, and eventually to others who meet you without requiring your disappearance. Belonging is often misunderstood as being accepted by others, but real belonging begins much closer than that. It begins when you stop negotiating your worth. when you no longer adjust your values, your voice, or your boundaries just to stay included. Belonging to yourself means you are no longer waiting for permission to exist as you are. You are rooted in your own presence, even when no one is watching, approving, or agreeing. For many women, strength has been defined as endurance, as holding on no matter the cost, as staying quiet, staying kind, staying available. But that version of strength is built on self-denial. Belonging to yourself requires a different kind of strength. The kind that allows you to stand alone without hardening your heart. The kind that says, I can care deeply without losing myself. When you belong to yourself, your choices shift. You are no longer driven by fear of rejection or hunger for validation. You begin to move from clarity instead of anxiety. You listen to your body's signals. You trust your inner voice even when it contradicts expectations. This trust doesn't make life easier, but it makes it truer. There is authority in self-belonging, not dominance, not control. Authority rooted in self-respect. You stop explaining your decisions to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You stop questioning your right to take up space. This authority is quiet, but it is firm. It changes the way you walk into rooms, the way you speak, the way you leave situations that no longer align. Belonging to yourself also reshapes your relationships. You no longer chase connection from a place of emptiness. You choose it from wholeness. You recognize when something costs you your peace, and you are willing to walk away without demonizing anyone. You understand that compatibility is not about how much you endure, but about how safe you feel being honest. This form of strength allows